Hey everyone, it's Pastor Chris. So glad you're joining me as we have a chance to talk about the tradition of imposing ashes. It's one of the important traditions of Ash Wednesday. Now, Ash Wednesday is actually something that's been around in our church for a really long time. Ash Wednesday enters us into the season of Lent, and Lent is actually mentioned as far back as the First Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, so this goes back a long time. And the imposition of ashes is a practice that began with Pope Gregory I in the 7th century. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on with Ash Wednesday, but I thought it'd be really fun today to share with you all what it looks like to get these ashes made, because unlike a lot of things, some traditions have a lot of different starting points, but one of the things we do here at Mountain View is we don't buy our ashes normally. Normally, we make our own ashes here at Mountain View. And how do we do that? That's a good question. First, you have to have palms. The palm branches that we used last year on Palm Sunday, or in this case 2 years ago, some of these came from a couple of years ago because of everything that's been going on in our world. These palm branches, this is actually a palm cross, are used dried out over the course of the year, and then we use these to burn and then make the ash. Now, a few supplies we need to start. First, we start off with a metal bowl for some reason, or metal bucket. For some reason, we don't use plastic. I don't know, something about things melting, minor concerns, right? So we try to be very safe as we do this. So we use a metal bucket to hold the ash, soon-to-be ashes that are these palm branches. You see, we've got all these palm crosses here. I've got even more palm branches here to add as we go along, but if I add too many, then I feel like I'm going to be Tom Hanks in Castaway, and I don't quite want to do that. So we have our palm branches. Next, we have rubbing alcohol. What's really important is because the ashes will be going on your skin, you don't want to add any sort of item that's going to be a chemical that might burn people's skin, that people might have sensitivities to. So we use rubbing alcohol, so there's a nice accelerant that's not going to cause issues with people's skin. One thing I also did before I began this process here today is I washed out this bucket because it's going to be used for the very first time, and the only thing this bucket is going to be used for here on in is for these burning of ashes, so that there's no other contaminations in there. So we're going to start by using this, and then we've also got some tongs, metal tongs, to stir up our palm branches as they turn to ash. And then once things get turned to ash, we have to let things cool for a little bit, so we'll have a cutscene there, and then we'll start sifting the ashes, because the ashes need to be ground pretty fine. I've actually tried to do this where we don't grind the ashes down to be really fine, and then there's chunks in the ashes that we use for the imposition of ashes. It doesn't work quite as well. So we're gonna start with our alcohol, which I really should have got this open first. There we are. And we're going to pour some in there. And we might get a little cross-contamination from this tree, apparently. I'm going to just try to get this light. There we are. And we're going to let that light up for a little bit. Feel free to come and take a closer look if you so desire. And we're just going to let that burn until it's kind of burned down quite a bit. And then once it's burned down some, we'll add a few more so we have a lot of ash to work from. And then we'll sift it down once it's all burnt out and cooled down just a little bit. So we'll give this a few minutes here. You see it's kind of burning nice and hot and nice and high. We've got a fair bit of a fair bit of alcohol in the bottom, so it's going to burn really well for a little while. So now that it's burned down a little bit, you can tell the flames are still pretty high, but I'm going to add just a little more here into the pile to allow this to keep burning down. They should burn pretty quickly now. It's a nice hot temperature. And I'll take the tongs just to kind of get things leveled up there. There we are. Oh. Very good. One important thing we do when we come to the burning of the ashes is it's very important that we don't actually try to douse the ashes out. We don't want to add any water to this mixture at all. We want it to be just natural ash, and we want to burn it out itself. The reason for that is because if you add water to wood ash, which palm ash is essentially a wood ash, it actually creates lye, which is something that actually is a very strong chemical, actually can burn skin. And so we don't want that to be the case. Very pretty. Now, one thing that's really important to point out that was just mentioned to me once again is it's always good to have a water source nearby. I know you're not supposed to douse this out, but in case the fire happens to get out of control for any reason, yes, we do have water nearby because we do everything safely here at Mountain View Lutheran Church. And this is what it's looking like in the ashes right now. So you can see there's still a little bit of the palm cross that's visible. It's still burning down. Embers are still quite hot. That'll keep burning for a little while longer. But we're going to keep on just kind of getting this a little mixed up a little bit, nice and smooth. And yeah, this should be good to go here not too long. So we've got a fair bit of ash here to work with. It's still a little hot, so I'm going to let that continue to cool for a few minutes longer. And then we'll show you how we go about sifting and making it nice and smooth into a powder that we can then use for Ash Wednesday. So the ash is not quite cool, but it's kind of cool enough to work with a little bit to get started. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that I kind of beat out any of the embers that I see remaining. You know, something about catching myself on fire doesn't seem like a thing to do. Remember, we do everything safely at Mountain View Lutheran Church. So, there we are. I'm going to take some of this ash. You see how there's a little bit of embers happening there yet, but you see this ash? I'm going to put the ash in one bowl right now. And I'm going to essentially just take them from one bowl and put them in the other. I'm using paper bowls primarily because I wanted to not use stuff that I had to clean later. I'm trying to save a little bit of time as far as the cleanup, so I can just throw these away after a little bit. So I'm going to take some of this, now it's separated from the main pile, and it's out enough that it's not going to catch fire on the paper plate, which is an important little detail. So I'm going to take some of this ash, I'm going to place it right in here. And this is a strainer that I got just at Target, so it's nothing too fancy. You want to find as fine a strainer as you can, and then what you do is you begin to press down on the strainer, and you can see, if you've got close-up view, how it's just making a fine little powder in the bottom of that bowl. And you just keep on pressing this down as the ash slowly disintegrates into the base. And one thing about this, like I said earlier, you don't want to use water when you mix your ashes for preparation for Ash Wednesday. Instead, you want to use an oil. Most often we use either a baby oil or perhaps an olive oil to make sure that it's something that is most people don't have any allergic reactions to, so that they can then have that on their skin, and it just makes a nice little bit of a mucky mixture to be able to then mix on this to place on the person's skin. Obviously the ash is fine enough that we can't just put it on the skin and hope it stays without some sort of binding agent like that oil. Now, one of the reasons we do ashes for Ash Wednesday is it's a reminder not just of our own mortality, but of where we come from. The words we use here at Mountain View Lutheran Church is, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. It's a reminder that we come from the earth, and unfortunately we all do die. So it's a reminder of our mortality as we enter into this Lenten journey together. It is both that symbol of mortality and repentance that we then take with us into this holy season of Lent, which then leads us, of course, to the great 3 days of Christ's betrayal, death, and then his resurrection. So that's just from a little bit right there, and we've made a little bit of a mess on the table. I'm glad we're doing this outside. If you want to come up close here, I can show you what we've got working with here. That's a pretty good powder to be an example of how we want to do ashes for Ash Wednesday. So I'm going to take some of this that's left in here, and I'm going to do the same thing. And we'll just keep on doing this until all the ashes in this bucket are properly sifted down into this fine powder. I burned pretty hot, so it shouldn't take too long at all. So we'll show you the finished product here in a couple of minutes. This is about the last of the ash here, and out of the last year's palm crosses, that was probably about 30 or 40 palm crosses from last year. And we had some of the ash kind of get blown away because it's a little bit windy out. For some reason they don't like the idea of me doing this inside. I don't know why. But you can see here that we've got about this much ash, and that should be more than sufficient when added with some oil for this coming year's Ash Wednesday services. So thanks for spending a little time with me. We are so excited to be able to go through this season with you, a very holy time in our church, and we ask that you would prayerfully consider making Ash Wednesday and Lent an important part of your faith journey this coming year. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to contact the church office if you have any questions about Ash Wednesday services. Service times are noon and 6:30 this year on February 17th. Come and join us. Peace.